Hello, and welcome to Gardener's World. As winter gradually gives way to spring, a whole new gardening year full of promise lies ahead of us. So for the next hour, we are going to celebrate the joy of sowing, growing, and sharing the love of gardening by looking back at some of our recent seasonal highlights. On today's programme, Adam visits a garden that's been lovingly nurtured over the past 15 years to create a perfect blend of colour, scent and imaginative planting.
Ben, I've just walked into this garden. I feel like I've landed on the most luxurious bed. This place, it feels so comfortable.
Oh, I'm really pleased you feel like that, yeah. That's what we want, I think, when people come into the garden.
We visit an alleyway in Manchester that's been transformed into a garden for the whole community.
To me personally, I've got peace out here. And when you go to work, the rush of the day and everything outside, the rush of all that, when you come round the back, it's just so nice with all the flowers in bloom.
Frances travels to Devon to meet a gardener who has a huge collection of unusual veg.
I discovered a whole world of perennial edible plants, hundreds, thousands of them.
And I'll be planting tender annuals for high summer colour. The critical thing about all these tender annuals is they will give intense colour right through into autumn, and that binds the garden together. No matter how bad the weather, signs of new life are now emerging daily, both wonderful in themselves and a promise of so much more to come. But gardens are about more than just colour, in fact, more than just plants. They're also about connection and community. And last year, Arit visited one that perfectly encompassed both.
I visit many gardens for the sheer joy, for inspiration, to learn. But today I've come to Cambridge to visit a paradise garden. And what makes this unique is that it's been built as an integral part of a mosque. This is the Cambridge Central Mosque, where the first thing that greets you is the garden. It's a place the local community share as an escape from the city just beyond. And it's also where women come together and share their passion for gardening. Once a week, volunteers Husna, Sophia, Nazreen, Abida, Kate and Nabila come here to sow seeds, propagate, weed and, of course, socialise. I think you need some extra compost. We're bringing it over. Yes, so what exactly are you doing today?
So we're sowing the seeds of the German pinks, the dianthus. So we've collected the seeds in envelopes, and now we're going to prepare the mixture that it is going to be sown in.
Okay.
We're going to put 1 cup of compost, and I'm adding half a cup of vermiculite.
Yeah.
And we mix it all together.
And are you able to just sell them to the people that come and visit the garden? Can anybody?
We sometimes give them away.
Yeah.
Sometimes put them in the garden as well, so
Yeah.
get more extra ones out.
Yeah.
of it.
Free plants, which is very good, isn't it? Excellent.
2 weeks ago I was weeding here, and it's not my favourite job, weeding. But do you know, the scent of the roses, the damask roses, it was so beautiful, so lovely that I could have just sat there weeding all day. It was just absolutely lovely. It's just such a pleasure to be gardening here.
The garden here is called a paradise garden. These originated and date back to ancient Persia, and they have influenced so much of what we know about gardening and design, not just here in the UK, but across the world. Emma Clark, who led the design of this garden, is an expert in this style of gardening, which is laden with symbolism. Emma, it is beautiful sitting in this garden, but it is a paradise garden, so I'd like to know exactly what are the elements that make it a paradise garden.
Really, a paradise garden on Earth is not just a symbol of the paradise garden in heaven, but it is supposed to be a foretaste of the garden that we hope will come to us eventually. Not yet, but providing we're good and kind and do the best we can. So the design is based upon the Quranic descriptions, which talks about the 4 gardens. And we have a limited space, so in order to have the idea of the 4 gardens, either side of the central fountain, we've got a division so that there are 4 beds there, 4 beds here. Key element, of course, is water. And the inner meaning is that it's the symbol of the soul. And it acts as this wonderful transition zone between this incredibly busy road. And then you have a slightly quieter space, and you can listen to the water, and you can calm down before going in for prayer.
Any day I come in masjid to praying, and I sit there I feel very peace and very nice.
Having come to the garden, Husna, what has that meant for you?
When I come here, it's give me a confidence to come and help in the garden and do some charity work as well. So that gave me lots of encouragement to do other stuff.
Oh, okay. This garden has given
this garden give me confidence to go out and get a job and doing it. And I'm really liking it.
That's amazing. I love it. I love the fact that the garden has been supporting you.
Yeah.
Really lovely. The head gardener is Helen Seal, who's developed the garden on organic principles. Despite the formal layout, she allows plants to tumble onto paths and seed heads to develop for the wildlife. In terms of the gardening ethos, what's the kind of key thing for you?
They're plants which are suitable to here, because Cambridge is incredibly dry and often droughted as well. And they're plants from the Mediterranean. They just thrive in dry conditions.
Yeah. So the plants you've chosen then, I can see like the organum, for example. What else have you got that you really enjoy?
Oh, of course, I enjoy all of them. But the Steeper Gigantea Pixie is an absolute hit. And the myrtle is a lovely shrub. And it just looks after itself. Who couldn't love it? Even the giant clover I didn't know before, the Trifolium rubens, that's done beautifully. The German pink is an absolute star. I want more of that, because we need plants which are resilient. And then there's the gorgeous Eryngium Silver Ghost, which just shines, particularly in the evening and night. We try to use natural predators, like ladybirds, which have just come in. We don't use herbicide. In fact, we don't even use much water. The plants really do have to look after themselves.
What I'm really impressed by is how much this space brings the community of the mosque and beyond together. Kate, good to see you there, busy at it. What are you up to there?
So I'm just trying to coax the jasmine around the railings. I mean, you know, this grows about 5 centimetres a week or something, so we have to keep on top of it.
How did you get involved in the garden?
I used to walk my dog past here, and as I watched it grow, I just thought, it's so beautiful. I wonder if they would like a rather inexpert volunteer. So I cheekily asked one day when their head gardener was here, and she said, yes, Wednesday mornings.
What keeps you coming back to this garden?
I think it's a combination of things, because, it's such a beautiful space. You often see people from the wider community sitting, just, having a quiet moment by the fountain. I'm like everyone else, I work at a computer, so this is a really nice thing to do for a couple of hours. But also, there's a really nice bunch of women work here, and I just like hanging out with them as well.
So, Abida, how does it make you feel to be in the garden?
It gives us pleasure to come here and peace of mind. We get relaxation. You really feel that this is a house of God. We have to look after it.
Sometimes it can be difficult to pinpoint why a garden feels good. But here in busy Cambridge, I think I know why. This garden has been beautifully designed. It has a gardener and a local community that cares for it, and delightful plants that tantalise all of the senses. So it goes to show, no matter your faith, this garden is a slice of paradise.
Last spring, I made significant changes to the damp garden, including the reintroduction of one of my favourite plants, Candelabra primulas. I did plant them in here before, and for a year or so they looked great. And this is their natural environment. They love damp shade. But the hostas and the Compilations grew too big, and the competition was too fierce. And although they like shade, they were actually shaded out. They just simply got no light and disappeared. So I've changed things around, created a space where I can plant them. And if you're not familiar with Candelabra primulas, they are obviously part of the primula family. Most of them come from China or the Himalayas around Tibet and North India. And they grow in these incredible tiers or whorls of flower. So you can have bright oranges, yellows, pinks, really dramatic flowers in late spring and early summer. I'm going to start with Primula beesiana. And this grows to about 18 inches tall with sort of pinky purple flowers. Now, these are small plants at the moment. They take about 3 years to reach full maturity, so you have to be quite patient. Now, those, as I say, are a kind of mauvey pink. But on this side, I've got a really good orangey yellow, which is Primula bulliana. Now, this is semi-evergreen, which tends to mean that if you live in a mildish area, they will stay evergreen. But in this garden, we do sometimes get some really cold weather, in which case they will lose their leaves, but they'll grow back. And I can put these in here for the moment. What I will do is, before planting them, I'm going to soak them. These are plants that are happiest when they're really wet. It doesn't matter how much you water the soil. If the compost itself is very dry, very often it doesn't absorb. So by soaking them first, that means they get off to a good start. I've added lots of compost as a mulch that's worked in. So this is really water retentive soil. Along with new plants in the damp garden, there were some old favourites in the dry garden. This little patch of honesty growing here in the corner, which is such a delight, has been reappearing every year for the last 20, 25 years. I absolutely love it. And I've sown seed, and I've collected seed, and I've tried to grow it elsewhere right across the garden with nothing like the same success as this little self-sown patch. And it goes back to the old thing, if you find the right place for a plant, then it will be happy. Now, it's time to visit the first of your gardens, which takes us all the way to Japan.
Hello, my name is Yasu. Welcome to Petit English Garden in Itoshima, Japan. A friend of mine who lives in UK loves bluebells and has told me how beautiful they are all over the forest floor. I've always wanted to visit UK in spring, but I've never had a chance. So I decided to grow a group of bluebells in my garden. However, some of the bulbs didn't grow well and disappeared. So every year I propagate bulbs in planters in order to replace the dead ones. I select the larger bulbs from the planter and plant them in plastic pots. Then plant the remaining smaller bulbs in the planter again. It's mid-April and the bluebells are all in bloom. The carpet of blue flowers in lovely shapes is truly beautiful and inspiring. I hope to increase the number of flowers much more. Thank you.
I love the attention to detail and the care with which Yasso propagated his bluebells. But if you're thinking of doing the same in your garden, and bluebells are wonderful, do make sure that you do it with English bluebells and not Spanish, because the English bluebell, which hangs just down on one side, and we think of as a carpet in woodland, is not too invasive. Whereas the Spanish bluebell, which hangs on both sides and is bigger and generally more robust, is truly, truly invasive. And once you get that into a border, it's very difficult to get it out. As spring flows seamlessly into summer, for all my attempted control and planning, the garden seems to take on an ecstatic life of its own. The cottage garden now is reaching that lovely, fulsome softness that is part of the dream of an English cottage garden. And yet there's more to come. The roses haven't really begun. Some are just tantalisingly appearing. There's so much else happening. The foxgloves and the alliums and the lupins. These are all doing their thing in a kind of loose, free manner. And for about 6 weeks, the cottage garden is my favourite part along with it, because the planting here has a looseness that we've allowed to happen, but also happens on its own, almost despite us. It just sets off and takes its own path, and then you become a spectator, and I love that. But beauty can be created in the most unexpected of places.
To me personally, it means I've got peace out here. It's nice, it's quiet, and when you go to work, the rush of the day and everything outside, the rush of all that, when you come round the back, it's just so nice with all the flowers in bloom. My name is Patrick, and I live in Levenshulme, and this is my alley garden. The space round this alleyway, when I moved in, was a mess. There was broken bottles, there was people around the back at night times, there was all the things that you really don't want. We never really came out in the alleyway. We just sort of like stayed in our own little garden until the council put the gates on. It was like my opportunity then to sort of like try and turn this into something beautiful for the neighbours. So I got stuck into it, anything that I could find. I thought I was going to stop at one point, but then there was always space to put more things in. Karen, my wife, is always saying, "You've got too many plants, you've not got any room." I said, "There's always room for one more." I like to write names of what the plants are called. And this one's a Himalayan honeysuckle. The bees love these, and I like them because of the bell shape on them. They look really nice. The pegs, I put them high up so that people can see them. They're not having to look down the bottom for them. The nice height, and it's a way of letting the neighbours or anybody that's out here know what the plants is. They want to buy those plants themselves. The things that I use with boxes, I use anything. Anything that I can find. Recycling, that's the main thing about it. It doesn't cost a lot because you can find things outside. What someone throws away, it's another man's treasure. These tyres I got from a local garage that were giving them away, painted them up, sorted all, get a nice colour with them, put the pot in the middle and put a cordyline in it to give it a nice height. I've got a bread bin that I use. So anything that I can find, I just use it and then just add them to the alley garden because it makes it look different and people enjoy seeing something different in the garden. Why I do that? That's a good question. Why are you making these things? The alley doesn't need any more. But I said, I'm just creating something, just making something different. To give somebody a laugh with seeing it, or inspire somebody that can do it, maybe do it better than me, but it's something that you can do and it's keeping me busy. My mum was good at gardening and she was good with her, you know, getting all green fingers, and so I've just naturally got that from her. In my alley garden, I've got loads of lovely plants, but this one is my mum's plum tree. When she passed 5 years ago, I took it and brought it here, and for the last 5 years, it hasn't bared anything, and this year, the first time, it's got plums growing on it, so I'm looking forward to trying it, and it's so special, this one for me. Before my mum passed, I was lucky to get her, she was able to see the alleyway. She loved it. She used to always, every time she come for a Sunday dinner, she'd always go out and she'd have a look and see all the new things that was growing. I think it has helped the community because we've got to know the neighbours round here. You chat, and when you come out to do bins, you know them by name. I've got to the stages now where I take cuttings and then I will, you know, grow the plants myself from off the cuttings, and then with that I can spread them around the alleyway and give them away as well. We've had other people who've seen it and they've started their own. They've gone off and they've cleaned up theirs and they've started, and it's cotton on with a lot of people now, that people now are trying to take ownership of their alleyway and to fix them up and make them look good.
I thought it was absolutely amazing what Patrick's doing in the community. He's working towards creating a space that people can enjoy. When you walk into the alleyway, it's just vibrant with colour, plants. I came away from Patrick's and felt I really wanted to do something with my alleyway, that people can see it as an extension of their garden. The community can come out, people can get to know each other in this space.
It's amazing to see my ideas spread. It's amazing to see people that have come, had a look at it, been inspired to start their own. Sometimes when you're sitting there, you don't feel as if you're actually in living room. You feel like and when the sun's shining, you feel good. You feel that you're somewhere else, and blue skies, and you could be anywhere. My wife keeps wanting to move. Well, Karen keeps wanting to move, but I keep saying, I've got this alleyway to look after, you see, so there's no one else to do it, so I'm here for the longer haul.
I'm clutching these sunflowers because they are part of the seasonal shift where the planting completely changes, right across the garden actually, but particularly affects here in the Jewel Garden. Because up until midsummer, the days are getting longer, so therefore there is more and more light. So there's a whole batch of plants that have evolved to respond to heat. So plants like these sunflowers and a whole batch of tender annuals are perfect for planting into your borders to replace that spring and early summer display. So I have rich colours from the sunflowers, and by the way, sunflowers don't need to be just yellow. These are Velvet Queen, which are a lovely sort of burnt orange colour. I've got Claret, which is ruby. I've even got a very pale yellow, Vanilla Ice, which I shall put into the cottage garden. So that has a good root system. I confess this has been in the pot probably a little bit too long. It's not root bound, but certainly it's very dry and has exhausted all the nutrition it's going to get from this. The planting itself is easy enough. Let's put that in. These will start flowering in about 2 weeks' time. Right, that's a little group of sunflowers, and I will repeat this in a dozen other places in the dual garden. But having got these in, now I've got more that I want to get in next to them and to work and coordinate with them. Now what I have here, a tithonia, Mexican sunflower, and there's no other plant that gives you such an intense orange. In our soil, they will grow 5 and even 6 foot tall. We grow all our tender annuals from seed, and by and large, that's a brilliant way to do it. It certainly saves a lot of money. It means we can have real quantity. So that goes in there like that. I've got a little bit more room in there. Now I've got a choice. I've got here some Cerinthe and I've got some Cosmos. I love Cosmos. This is Cosmos Antiquity, and I love the intensity of that colour with the yellow boss in the middle. It will fade a bit. Most Cosmos flowers do, but by deadheading them, that will keep on flowering for months. But the critical thing about all these tender annuals is they will give intense colour right through into autumn, and that binds the garden together.
Now, still to come on today's programme. Frances visits a gardener with a huge variety of perennial veg.
This is Good King Henry. Okay. And who doesn't want to grow a plant called Good King Henry? So this is a green leafy vegetable, a bit like spinach, and it's been grown for centuries.
And we meet a grower who finds that gardening nourishes her mind, body and soul.
I will take moments out of the day to just walk outside, and I'll go and walk around the greenhouse and just see what's coming ripe, and it's a moment of calm and a moment of peace.
But first, Adam visited a walled garden in September. There was a beautiful balance of both ornamental and productive plants.
I've come to West Sussex to see a wonderful garden that's been given a new lease of life over the last 15 years. But more than that, I'm looking forward to meeting the head gardener. His name's Ben Pope, and I've heard an awful lot about him. The property owners commissioned Arnie Maynard to design the garden. As it developed, Ben was appointed head gardener to take it forward. And for the last 14 years, that's exactly what he has done. Moulding and developing the garden into something unique and truly beautiful. Ben, I've just walked into this garden. I feel like I've landed on the most luxurious bed. This place, it feels so comfortable.
Oh, I'm really pleased you feel like that, yeah. That's what we, that's what we want, I think, when people come into the garden.
What was it like when you first came?
There was a garden here before. There has been for the last 200-300 years. But Arnie was designing this area, and he'd stripped it back to the bare bones. He'd left all the really important things, so like the lovely old apple trees, the layout, as it were. Yeah. The beds were completely empty, but it still had that atmosphere. I walked through the Moongate, and straight away I was just like, I would love to work here.
The place, I said it feels beautiful, but it carries a certain atmosphere.
For sure, yeah. As you walk around the garden, there's different parts of atmosphere. Different things that feel cool and calm. And then in here, it's quite full on, as you probably said, exuberant and gushing. And you'll go to another part, it's quiet space, it's a moment to breathe. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do, sort of capture the atmosphere of specific parts of the garden, but also the seasons.
I'd love today to find out exactly how you garden this space. Can I get my hands in the soil and do a bit?
Of course you can. Be a pleasure.
In early autumn, the gardening team are kept busy, harvesting produce for the house. It's a key part of the head gardener role to ensure the walled garden is bursting with cut flowers, fruit and vegetables. I do love the way that you've used the verticals here, mate.
You get so much use out of a tiny little space, and it's great for, you know, any size garden. This is an arch, but it could be a fence panel, it could be a wall, you know, it could be all sorts of things. We combine, obviously, edibles.
Yeah.
So you've got the belotti beans here, you can do climbing squashes, but also ornamentals. So the lovely, you know, Ipomea lobata, sort of looking really, really good. And these things really enjoy, you know, the late summer. They really come into their own.
Straight away, raspberries and bits, you're not growing them in the obvious way. You've got them as fans, these are working as cordons. So there's a beauty there, straight away.
Yeah, there certainly is a beauty, but there's also practical reason. You know, you get so much in a tiny bit of space. You're literally a foot and a half out, and you've got a crop there to pick.
Yeah. There is a lovely, harmonious feel to the place. The soft, romantic planting is repeated throughout. But there's something else that pulls the whole garden together, and that is the creative use of topiary and clipped hedges. Keeping this lot in shape takes time, so I'm going to give Ben a hand to cloud prune this box.
It's great to have some, you know, company.
Yeah. I'm clipping this, and actually, in reality, you don't seem to have much in the way of sort of caterpillar damage.
We had it 3 years ago, and I thought, oh, it's migrated out of London, it's reached us, you know?
Yeah.
Every year now, we sort of have a little bit, but all I can put it down to is we've got masses of bats and garden birds, you know? And I think between the two of them, they're just kind of never had to spray for it, so...
If we're brave enough, and we can offer enough diversity of habitat and food in our gardens, just to back off, wildlife will play its part and come. It's just sometimes, isn't it, being brave enough to do that, really.
It really is, yeah, and like you say, it's having that courage to just hold back and watch.
What do you reckon? About there?
It's looking good, yeah. Lovely.
You can always moan about me when I've gone, can't you? Now, Ben has more stuff for me to do. We are finishing cutting back the wildflower meadow. So once you've sort of done that, you sort of leave down for what, week, 10 days, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it all depends on the weather conditions, really. You're just waiting for it to dry out, you know, the seeds within it to dry so that they'll fall through as we rake and collect.
Because have you got a yellow rattle in here?
We do, yeah. But it flowers much earlier in the year and has already dropped its seed. And again, the yellow rattle is helping to control the grass vigor.
And the mix in here of wildflowers, you know, and even here, I think I'm raking up some alchemilla and bits and pieces. So what's the thinking with that?
You know, like any gardener, I'm kind of treating the meadow a bit like a border.
Yeah.
And you know, it's for diversity, you know, and also to make it look attractive.
Even looking over there where you've got the canes in, I presume that's marking something?
Yes, yeah. So as we're cutting through, we've got orchids that have moved in.
Wow.
They're helleborines and dactylorizas, so not the rarest, but equally absolutely lovely to have. And we want them to seed as much as possible, so we won't cut them down.
See that face there? That's a jealous face.
You love it.
It's slightly jealous.
I think we're almost pretty much there, so...
Cup of tea?
Yeah, slice of cake.
Now you're talking, mate. Yeah. I knew this was going to be a good place. What I've realised is you've created a garden that provides a million moments. But more than anything, you get the sense that the soul to this garden is actually provided by you.
Oh, well, that's an amazing thing to say, and I'd love to claim it. But yeah, my hard work, along with everyone else who's involved, has kind of hopefully given you those moments today.
Fresh, seasonal fruit is one of life's treats. And by growing vertically as Ben did, you can make the most of limited space.
How about these cherries? These are morello cherries. We netted them to keep the blackbirds off because as they ripen, the blackbirds love them. If you're going to use them straight away, you can just take the cherry and pull it off the stalk like that. But if you want them to last a little bit longer, then you need to cut them stalk and all. But when you're doing that, just be careful you don't cut the spurs, the little woody spurs that come off the side shoots that bear the fruit, because they will bear next year's fruit as well. And of course, these are not sweet cherries. They have to be cooked, but they make wonderful jam. They make a superb sort of jus for putting on ice cream or yogurt. They make a really good tart, and I'm delighted that they've survived everything that our birds can throw at them.
Any space you have can be used to grow productively. And one of our viewers near Stockport was certainly making the most of hers.
Hello, I'm Laura, and this is my small suburban garden in East Cheshire. This year we want to grow as many of our own fruit and vegetables as we can. We want to try and utilise the space in the borders we have that normally I would be growing annuals in, but this year we're going to be growing vegetables. Our garden's pretty small. It's got 6-foot high fences, it's west facing, it's full of children's play equipment. It didn't sit right to just carry on as if nothing had changed. So in a bid to keep my mind more occupied, it was time to start growing vegetables more seriously. I'm mixing little clusters of things like French beans, peas, beetroot, and even these red cabbages amongst the perennials, in the hope the garden will be both beautiful and productive without taking away the space we need for our young children. Our garden is far from perfect. Slugs help themselves regularly, and with 2 small children, chickens and a dog, things get dug up, pulled out, trodden on or squashed on quite a regular basis. But if we can do something that puts food on our table ourselves and smiles on our faces along the way, I think we'll have done some good.
Now, it's interesting that gardeners, after a while, tend to veer towards either growing vegetables and fruit and edible plants, or towards the more decorative side. And traditionally, they haven't overlapped hugely. But increasingly, young gardeners are ignoring those boundaries. And we went to visit Lucy Hutchings in her garden in Suffolk. And Lucy is one of those gardeners that sees beauty in every kind of edible plant, and not just beauty, but also the well-being that they bring to her.
The garden is a real haven for me. I was going through a really stressful period and I just needed something that was a complete distraction and totally removed from what was going on. I needed something just to make me happy and in a really uncomplicated way. I will take moments out of the day to just walk outside, and I'll go and walk around the greenhouse and just see what's coming ripe, and it's a moment of calm and a moment of peace. Everything that I grow, I want to be able to harvest one way or another, but I also want a really, really beautiful garden, and I think that's what a lot of people feel. You don't have to choose, you can have absolutely the best of both worlds. There's a really diverse mix of different edibles in the garden. I've found a way to use as much space as humanly possible. Got your kind of classic veg, beans and cucumbers and that kind of thing, all the way through to some more unusual stuff. My favourite plant to grow has always been and remains tomatoes. I just love them. As plants, they give me a lot of reward. And for me, they're like little objects of art. An absolute rainbow of jewel-like colours, and they're so beautiful to grow. But also, from a production point of view, I can realistically grow all the tomatoes that we need as a family for the whole year in my greenhouse, which I think is really lovely to be able to do. I would probably have to admit that I am slightly obsessed by tomatoes, but that's fine, I can admit my faults. Okay, this is one of my all-time favourite heirlooms and it's fantastic. It's called Ananas Noir, or black pineapple if you prefer the English, but you'll usually find it with the French name. And it's just a really fantastic all-round heirloom. This one really gets exciting when you slice into the middle. So it should have a really spectacular set of colours going on. Okay, so there we go. If you can see, there's this amazing psychedelic, almost tie-dye effect on the middle, which is so striking. It's a fantastic slicing tomato. And they're super juicy. It's all over my hands. And the smell is amazing. You've got that little bit of acid that keeps it interesting and like tingles on the tongue, but then it ends on something really sweet, and then you've got fruitiness and a little bit of earthiness. I love this tomato. It's one of my favourites. So this tomato is called striped stuffer, and it's a red tomato, and you can see it's got like speckled yellow stripes down it, and it's usually quite relatively large and heavily ribbed. If you like cooking with tomatoes, this one does something really different, and that's why I like it. So you should be able to cut off the top, just like that, and then you can see that it's hollow inside. You can see the gaps. This central section where the seeds are grows in a relatively tight ball, so you should be able to scoop that whole middle part out in one go. And then you've got a lovely hollow tomato ready to stuff, and then you should be able to just pop the top back on and roast. I've tried a lot of methods of supporting tomatoes over the seasons and hadn't quite found one that worked really well, especially supporting a really big tomato like this mushroom basket one here. I had a eureka moment at the beginning of the season and thought bungee cords, they're absolutely perfect. They've got a hook bottom and top, so they're really easy to attach on, and they're nice and strong, and it's easy to wind the elastic around the tomato plant as it grows. It's worked really well. I've even got them going across the roof in some of them. So rather than having to stop the tomatoes when they hit the apex of the roof, I can then keep winding them across the top of the roof and keep them going. So I've got really, really tall tomatoes. They really support them as they're hanging down. So I'm completely converted now. It's bungee cords all the way for me. So, like a lot of people, I have not had the luxury of a massive garden, but I have absolutely zero self-control and I want to grow everything. You do not necessarily want to have to choose between having a beautiful garden and having a really productive one. I've got 10 squash plants on this tunnel in a really, really small footprint, and it's allowed me to plant loads and loads of stuff around them as well and really make the most of space. Then you've got something that's really doing both the edible and the ornamental job really, really well. I've got some massive tromboncinos just on the end of it there. Everything's all interplanted, and the effect is really, really beautiful. I bring colour in with edible flowers like these physalis and peppers and sunflowers. This is peppermint chard. The name has nothing to do with the flavour. It doesn't taste minty. It's named because of these neon pink stems that look like candy canes. It gets so big and will reliably produce greens for a good year or so. My garden is a huge source of pride and joy for me. It's important for me to show just how beautiful edible plants can be. And I feel really privileged that I get to share that with people and hopefully inspire them a little bit about just how much is possible with edible planting and edible growing and different ways to make the most of the space that they've got.
Now, I always prune my blackcurrants immediately after harvesting the fruit. And this gives light and air so that the new growth will ripen, and that should bear some fruit next year. Because blackcurrants, unlike red currants, white currants or gooseberries, produce their best fruit on young growth. So on first-year growth, the very best is usually on second-year growth, then it starts to tail off, and by the fourth or fifth year, it's producing hardly any fruit at all. So the pruning pattern is to take out a third of the bush, removing the oldest third of the growth every year, so you renew it every 3 or 4 years, and that way you get maximum crop from it. And unlike red currants, gooseberries or white currants, you don't just prune back to a side shoot, you go right down to the base and cut off the oldest third and remove it completely. But you can see that the older growth is harder, it's dark brown, and then you've got the next stage of growth and then on. And this will keep a better shape. You don't want it to sprawl too much. Even the wood, when you cut it, smells pungently of lovely blackcurrants. Gardening like this here at Longmeadow is pretty easy. The soil is rich, the plants are happy, the weather is never too harsh. However, there are places where gardening can be quite robust. Anna Learson has sent us this film from her garden in Oban on the west coast of Scotland.
Hello! Hello! Welcome to our garden. We moved into our rental house here in January of this year, and we're very keen to start gardening. We bought a pretty cheap greenhouse online, but it kept blowing away in, as you can hear, pretty strong wind. This is actually quite a calm day today. We got so fed up of having to rebuild it every time that my partner decided to build us this. We salvaged the panels, and we've actually used some of the struts as supports for our plants. But as you can see, things have really taken off since then. We've got tomatoes, lettuce, dill. And what's this one, Saoirse? Cabbage. Cabbage! As you can see, we've also got a bunch of shells.
Yes, we have.
We had so many, in fact, that we decided to make a shop. Do you want to show them the shop? It's out the front. So we made a little free shop with all our spare plants. We advertised what we had on offer and how to look after them, and put them all in pots outside the front gate. They all found happy homes within a few days, so today we're adding our last couple outside with some extra paintings. Thanks for all the tips, Gardeners World. Bye. Bye. Bye.
In the cottage garden, we have one bed set aside just to grow flowers for the house.
It doesn't have to be big. It can just be a square metre or so, but it means that you can grow your favourite plants that you like to cut to bring indoors without ravaging your borders. Now, this has been a cut flower bed for the last few years, and last year we just grew dahlias in here and they grew well. And we made a decision for the first time in quarter of a century not to dig them up and bring them indoors over winter, but we left them in the ground. And you can see they're fine. They've come through winter perfectly well. We mulched it very heavily. I suppose it was a mulch about whatever that is, about a foot thick of compost, which both will have protected the tubers and also enriched the soil. They did grow back slower. They flowered later, but the plants are bigger and stronger, and I suspect they will flower for longer. And it means that we can come out and we can just cut flowers for the house freely.
Being able to share produce and knowledge is all part of the joy of gardening. And in July, Frances visited a plot on the edge of Dartmoor to learn more about growing perennial veg.
I always try to spend as much time as I can on my allotment, simply because growing fruit and veg for myself and my family is such a lovely thing to do. But I'm always keen to learn from other growers and experiment with what I grow myself. That's why I've come to Devon, to learn more about the incredibly exciting things that are growing here. This 5-acre plot is co-owned by several families. They grow and swap the kinds of familiar vegetables that we often grow on our allotments and gardens, most of which are annuals and grow from seed each year. But one member, Mandy Barber, prefers to push the grow your own boundaries, choosing instead to grow perennial vegetables, which once they're in the ground, come back year after year. Mandy has been a passionate veg grower all her life, but since she discovered her first perennial vegetable, she has never looked back. There's so much, isn't there?
I know, it does feel very abundant, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So what got you into all of this?
Well, about 12 years ago, I discovered a plant called a perennial 9-star broccoli, which was a fantastic plant that grew for about 5 years, and that was the beginning of a great perennial vegetable adventure, I think. And I discovered a whole world of perennial edible plants, hundreds, thousands of them.
So how many have you actually got here?
I did try and do a count the other day because I was trying to stick labels on them all.
Yes.
And I think it got up to about 220 or something.
And you're not growing these just to eat them, you're also researching them, is that right?
Yeah, testing them out, potential future food crops.
I mean, I knew of a few basic perennial veg, but I just had no idea there was such a huge variety of them. It's kind of incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what is this plant here?
This is Good King Henry.
Okay.
And who doesn't want to grow a plant called Good King Henry? So this is a green leafy vegetable, a bit like spinach, and it's been grown for centuries. And there are 3 harvests: an early spring harvest of the young tender green leaves, and then the unopened flowering shoots can be used a little bit like an asparagus spear. And then amazingly, as it's a relative of quinoa as well, the seeds can be harvested and used as a quinoa substitute. And these really haven't any pests at all. I really don't need much looking after.
Do you feed it, or?
I haven't done anything to this one. It's quite happy on its own.
How do you propagate this?
The best method is to sow it in autumn in a nice big pot, sort of surface sow, and then just ignore it basically for a couple of months, and then one day you'll be walking past your pot and you'll see hundreds of little seedlings coming up.
Good old Good King Henry. Wow. What is this? This is amazing.
Well, these are the lovely climbing vines of Apios americana, which is also called hopness.
Right.
This was once an important food for Native American people. Out of all the roots and tubers I grow, I think this has got a very special place in my heart.
Why is that?
Well, they have everything going for them. They're like beautiful vines. Later in the summer, they'll have the most gorgeous purpley pink maroon flowers.
Right.
And they have the most delicious tubers, a bit like the best plate of chips that you've ever eaten. So this is a single tuber, which is probably about the average size that you'd get.
Right.
These are grown in containers. When it comes to harvest time, you can tip the whole thing out once the vines have died back.
Okay.
And then most of your tubers will have accumulated in the pot, so it's an easier way of harvesting.
And are they hardy?
The tubers themselves are very, very hardy, so they can stay in the ground over winter.
I think I might have to grow one of these myself. It's absolutely lovely. I love it. One of the issues with annuals, for those of us who don't have a greenhouse or polytunnel, is that we can't produce fruit and vegetables until the weather warms up, which means we're left with what's known as a hungry gap.
But perennials have a really strong root system, which means they get going as soon as the temperatures rise.
This is a Hablitsia tamnoides, also known as Caucasian spinach, herbaceous perennial climber, and the leaves can be used just like spinach or used as a salad leaf. And the wonderful thing about this is that you don't need to take up a cultivated bed or a sunny part of your garden. They'll actually thrive really well in a shady, quite damp spot. Wow. It goes from a few centimetres very early in the year. By May, June time, we would have reached about 3 metres in height.
And it's hardy?
Tolerate down to -25, -30.
That's what I love here. There are so many fascinating plants to whet the perennial veg appetite, like perennial leek, dwarf Jerusalem artichoke, and skirret, a kind of root vegetable. The list goes on. Now this is a plant that I do know well. This is sea kale or Crambe maritima, and I know it from childhood because it grows all around the coast where I grew up and all around the coasts in the UK. It's edible and it's beautiful. The new shoots, when they emerge through the sand or the shingle, are a lovely rich purpley colour, but you can force them like rhubarb and they'll be paler and more tender. But even if you don't force them, the tender young leaves are delicious. You steam them, add butter, they're lovely. Or you can eat the florets before they flower and cook them like broccoli, or let them flower and then eat these lovely little seeds, which are a little bit like peas. If you want to grow sea kale, don't go and dig it up from the wild. It's protected, so it's illegal to do that. But it's widely available in nurseries, or you can buy the seeds and sow them yourself. And this beautiful architectural and delicious plant will grace any garden. You see, to me, this just shows how ornamental edibles can be. You don't have to compromise on beauty as well as it being functional.
I know, that's the wonderful thing about an edible ornamental garden. You don't have to separate your vegetable garden from your flower garden.
But what is this one?
This is Taunton Dean, which is an old West Country perennial kale. You can harvest the leaves all year round. Traditionally, they would be passed from neighbour to neighbour just through cuttings. Its other name is actually cottager's kale, which sort of makes reference to its use by ordinary folk over the centuries. And that's the thing that's kept this variety alive, where so many have disappeared.
I mean, for me, this just is what's so special about perennial veg. You plant it out once, you don't have to do anything to it, and it looks amazing. And in the spirit of passing things on, would I be able to have a cutting of this, please?
Of course, you definitely need your own Taunton Dean.
I think so too.
Well, everyone's feeling rather sleepy here. Certainly Patty's found herself a nice nest. Nellie keeps flopping in the shade. I think that's it for this week.
But we've got lots more Gardener's World to celebrate, so do join us again next week. Until then, bye-bye.